Hello students, this is Md Aazif and today I present with a video of a poem from the book Beehive. This is the very first poem from the poetry section of Beehive. The name of the poem is The Road Not Taken, which is written by Robert Frost. So firstly, try to find it out about the poet Robert Frost. This picture is of Robert Frost, who is the poet of the poem The Road Not Taken. Now here is a small introduction about the poet Robert Frost. Robert Frost's full name was Robert Lee Frost, who was born on 26th of March in the year of 1874 and died on 29th of January in the year of 1963. Robert Frost was an American poet. His work was initially published in England before it was published in the United States. He was known for his realistic depictions of rural life and his command of American colloquial speech. Robert Frost frequently wrote about settings from rural life in New England in the early 20th century, using them to examine complex social and philosophical themes. Now here you can see that on this page there's a brief summary about the whole poem, which is of 4 stanzas. After this we'll discuss each stanzas separately. So just take a look the very short summary of the poem The Road Not Taken. The poet, means Robert Frost, says that once he was walking down the road and reached a fork. He could walk over one of the paths only. He took time to choose the right path. He inspected them to decide which was a better option and then chose the one which seemed less walked over. He kept the other one for some other day, although he knew that he would never get the chance to walk over it. He would go further on the chosen path and not get a chance to go back on it. As he walked on the chosen path, he realized that both the paths were similar. Even he felt that his future depended on the choice that he made. Now, here I am going to start with the very first stanza of the poem, The Road Not Taken. 2 roads diverge in a yellow wood, and sorry, I could not travel both. And be one traveller, long I stood and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Now, here is the explanation of the very first stanza. That once the poet was walking down a road and then there was a diversion. There were 2 different paths and he had to choose one out of them. The poet says that as he was one person, he could travel on one road only. He had to choose one out of these 2 roads, which were yellow wood, which means a forest with leaves which are wearing out and they have turned yellow in color. It was the season of autumn, which represent a world full of people, where people have been living for many years. They represent people who are older than the poet. The poet kept standing there and looked at the path very carefully as far as he could see it. Before taking the path, he wanted to know how it was. was it suitable for him or not. He was able to see the path till from where it curved, after which it was covered with trees and was hidden. Even these all things happen in our life also. When we have choices, we have alternatives, but we have to choose only one out of them. We take time to think about the pros and cons, whether it is suitable for us or not, and then only we take a decision on what path we should choose. Now here is the second stanza, which says, "Then took the other just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had warned them really about the same." Now here is the explanation of the second stanza, where the poet kept on looking at one path for a long time to check if it is the right path for him or not. And then he decided and started walking on another path, because he felt that the both paths were equally good. The poet says, just as fair, so he felt that both paths were equally good and started walking on one of them. Even the poet adds that maybe he felt that the path was better for him, so he chooses it as it had grass on it, which means that it was unused. Not many people had walked on this path earlier. That is why this path was grassy. And wanted wear means that it was not walked over by many people. After he walked on the path for some distance and realized that both the paths had been worn out the same way. Both the paths were similar and worn out. It happens in our life when we take any path or option, but all of them have the same benefits or disadvantages or problems or challenges, and we must face them. We think that we are choosing a better option, but it is not that way.
Now here is the third stanza of the poem, which says, "And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how ways lead on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back."
Now, below you can see this explanation of the stanza is given, where the poet says that both the paths were similar that morning. Both had leaves on them, and no one had stepped on them, as they were still green in color. The poet decided that day he would take one path and keep the other path for another day. Although he knew that one way leads on to another way, he also knew that he could not go back on the choice that he had made. Similarly, even our life, once we choose an option, we must keep on moving ahead with that option, and we never get a chance to come back and take the other option that we had left earlier. Now we have come up to the very last stanza, but not the least, of the poem, where the poet say, "I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." Now, in the very last stanza, the poet says that in the future he will take a deep breath and say that once upon a time he had reached such a point in life that there were two options for him, and he traveled on that road which had been traveled upon by lesser number of people. That decision of his decided his future. Now, just like the poet, when you grow up, then you will see or you will say that once upon a time when you were young, you had two options. The choice that you made or made you what you became of it. Here is a very strong message for all the students that you should be wise and be careful while making choices out of the options that you have in your life, because your future depends on the choice that you make today. Hope you are going to gain benefits through this video. Now I'm signing off with an assurance that I will come back with a new topic. Till then, take care.